He was there, standing before her, his eyes sincere, his heart exposed, holding a bouquet he'd picked himself. These weren't impulse purchases. He'd researched. He'd thought. He wanted it to be special. It was their third date. The mood was good. She laughed at his jokes, complimented his kindness, said things like, "You're different from the others." He believed he'd finally be appreciated for being the right guy. But then she backed off. She said she didn't feel the connection. That he was incredible, and that but is what destroys him inside. Because it's in that but that lies the humiliation of every man who believed love was a matter of merit. That all it took was being kind, present, attentive, and everything would work out. The problem isn't being good, it's being predictable. And predictability is the grave of desire. What they call a nice man isn't the opposite of a scoundrel. He's the opposite of magnetic. He's not remembered. He's not hated. He's forgotten. The nice guy is the most cruelly punished figure in the female emotional theater because he gives everything before she has even begun to desire anything. This is the first illusion you need to destroy, that love is fair. It isn't. Love, the real kind, the kind that pulses, the kind that burns, is not born of comfort, but of tension. The nice guy offers emotional stability right away, but forgets that desire is a wild animal. It feeds on uncertainty, on mystery, on space, not on excess. And here comes the most brutal concept. The nice guy rarely acts out of kindness. He acts out of fear. He wants to secure love through performance. His affection is a disguised attempt at control. He gives to receive. He yields to be accepted. He believes that if he's good enough, he'll be chosen. But this isn't love. This is emotional bargaining. And women sense this, sometimes unconsciously, but always with instinctive clarity. Robert Glover in No More Mr. Nice Guy explains this phenomenon accurately. The nice guy constructs his identity in a constant attempt to avoid rejection. He's inauthentic. He's strategic, even if he thinks he's being sincere. That's why his actions feel wrong, weightless, uninspired, unmagical. He hides behind kindness because he can't bear the pain of being himself and not being accepted. But the brutal truth is that no one loves a man who needs acceptance to feel worthy. Here's the thing. Women aren't attracted to men who put themselves in a position of emotional inferiority. And the nice guy does this all the time. He gives in too soon, overpraises, overadapts. He erases his own boundaries to fit what he thinks she wants. But in doing so, he disappears. He becomes a blank canvas. And nothing is more unattractive than someone who lacks emotional resilience. Let's dig deeper. Love, the one we so desperately seek, is not a field of justice. It's a field of forces. Nietzsche once said that everything he considered good was linked to the expansion of power. True love, the one that drives you mad, the one that captivates you, is the one that arises from involuntary admiration, from the enchantment of someone who doesn't need you, but still chooses you. The good guy begs to be loved. And this, to the female psyche, sounds like a red flag. If you need her approval to feel whole, you're not whole. And someone who isn't whole doesn't lead. They don't provoke tension, they don't pose a danger. Yes, danger. It's a word that seems wrong, but remember this. The seducer archetype isn't a predictable protector. He's an enigma, and every enigma has a hint of threat. Something uncontrollable, unstable, mysterious. The good guy, on the other hand, is completely decipherable. He's an open book even before he's desired. And if she can predict your every reaction, then she's already lost interest before it's even begun. Then you might say, but what about healthy, mature love based on trust? Of course. It exists, but only after desire has been established, only after tension has been created. True connection isn't the starting point. It's the reward for having successfully generated emotional impact. The nice guy reverses this order. He delivers the reward before the test. And this generates only one reaction: boredom. Note that the words women use to describe this type of man are always the same: cute, nice, trustworthy. None of these words are associated with desire. They're lukewarm compliments. Polite. They symbolize respect, not fascination. And that's not her fault. It's biology. Her brain isn't analyzing her emotional history. It's looking for traces of emotional dominance, of posturing, of strategic absence. And all of these the nice guy abhors. He's been trained to be everything society says is right: understanding, available, affectionate. But in practice, these traits are only attractive when they come from a man who is also a challenge. who has presence, who has boundaries, who commands respect. When they come from a man who doesn't need to please to feel validated. Cleopatra didn't fall in love with loyal scribes, she seduced emperors, because they were men with mastery over themselves, over space, and over others. And mastery doesn't mean aggression, it means presence, an aura. An energy that says, I can choose, I don't need to beg. This is the breaking point between the good guy and the seducer. One operates out of need, the other out of an abundance of choice. The tragedy of the good guy is that he believes he's playing fair. He sees himself as fair, ethical, correct, and perhaps he is. But he doesn't understand that the realm of desire isn't rational, it's instinctive. He doesn't want to play the game of seduction. He wants to be rewarded for not playing. But desire doesn't respect ethical rules. It's animal, and the animal only responds to what instigates it, not to what consoles it. The cruelest thing is that often, the woman who rejects this type of man suffers for it. She recognizes his value, she sees him as a good partner. But her body, her emotions, her instincts, they scream no, because something is missing. The spark is missing, and sparks aren't made with affection. They're made with distance, presence, and emotional authority, with the ability to tense the emotional space of the relationship. And here lies the deepest wound. The good guy hates scoundrels because deep down he envies them. Because they represent everything he doesn't have the courage to be. They make mistakes, but they are remembered. They step out of line, but they generate emotion. And the good guy, no matter how hard he tries, provokes nothing but relief at his absence. He is neither feared nor desired. He is merely endured. Therefore, his mission is not to become a scoundrel. But it's also not to insist on being the good guy hoping she will see his worth. It's to transcend both. It's about embodying the emotional makeup of someone who doesn't need to please, who doesn't give in out of fear, who knows that love isn't about being chosen. It's about being impossible to ignore. The first step is to kill the good guy inside you. Not the good guy, that one must live, but the good guy, that one must die. Because as long as he lives, you'll always think you're losing to worse men. But the truth is you're losing to freer men. Men who don't ask permission to be desired. Men who know the art of withdrawing, of not responding, of imposing silence. And it's in this silence that her imagination begins to work. And when her imagination works for you, you've already won. And that's where the true transformation begins. The replacement of performance with presence, of need with dominance, of expectation with magnetism. But first, you need to accept. She won't love you because you're the right guy. She'll only love you when you stop trying to be loved. And it's precisely when the good guy dies that the real game begins. Because now, without the shield of illusion, you finally see what's behind the curtain. Female desire is not a logical process, nor is it fair. It's a meticulously orchestrated chaos, orchestrated by forces most men don't even know exist. A woman doesn't desire based on what's right, she desires based on what activates. And what activates isn't affection, it's tension. It's not security, it's uncertainty. Desire is, at its core, a chemical reaction that only ignites when the male structure is tested and resists without yielding. This is the contradiction that destroys weak men. They want to be desired for emotional merit, but female desire was never built to reward stability. It was programmed biologically to seek impact, and impact rarely comes from the predictable. A woman's desire is a sensory radar that detects traces of symbolic power. She needs to feel that this man can shape the environment, affect her emotional state, alter the dynamics of any space, even in silence. And this presence is rare. That's why it's so desired. That's why she says, I want a sensitive, present guy who listens to me, who's always available. But men who offer exactly that quickly become disposable. Because what she says she wants and what she desires are distinct dimensions. This isn't an accusation, it's a psychic realization. Robert Greene reveals this masterfully in The Art of Seduction. Desire requires tension, and tension arises from ambiguity, from not knowing, from the doubt of whether he'll return or not, whether he'll give in or disappear. She falls in love with the emotional impact, with the oscillation between presence and absence, with the look that seems to promise and retreat at the same time. It's not about being bad, it's about being structurally dominant. Dominant in the sense of not being shaken, of not selling out, of being desired because it's scarce, and scarce because it doesn't need to prove itself. Mystery, one of the greatest seducers of the modern era, didn't have the looks of a heartthrob, nor the status of a celebrity, but he understood something most men ignore. A woman needs to feel drawn into an enigma. And the enigma only exists when there's something to lose, when there's the possibility of rejection, when there's silence after the connection. It's the emptiness after the touch that intensifies desire, because she feels she doesn't yet have you. And what you don't have instigates. Neuroscience has already confirmed female desire is more intensely activated in unpredictable environments. It's the famous variable reward experiment. One group of women received constant, predictable praise. Another group received random, unpredictable praise, followed by distancing. Guess which ones became more obsessed? The ones who received unpredictable stimuli. Their brains released more dopamine in the face of uncertainty than in the face of continuous validation. This isn't machismo, this is dopamine. It's how we're biologically programmed. The common man's mistake is trying to be constant when desire demands fluctuation. He wants to offer total presence as proof of love. But female desire isn't a summation equation. It's a cycle of tension and release. When you offer only release, only affection, only presence, only care, she settles. And complacency is the opposite of enchantment. Have you ever seen a woman rationalizing her passion for a man who clearly doesn't treat her as a priority? She says things like, "I don't know what's wrong with him. He confuses me. I should walk away, but I can't." This isn't weakness. It's the effect of chaos. She's addicted to the emotional instability he provokes. Because it's this instability that triggers the most primitive areas of the brain. What makes her dream about him, stalk his Instagram, remember his scent in his absence. Desire isn't born from presence. It's born from absence. And that's where the brutality of the game comes in. You can be the most loyal, the most fair, the most affectionate man, but if you don't master the emotional rhythm of the interaction, you'll always be second best. Because desire is a theater where the protagonist is the man who manages to disappear at the height of tension. He creates expectation, but doesn't deliver immediately. He hints but doesn't explain. He appears and disappears. And in this disappearance, she idealizes. And in the idealization, she becomes trapped. Nietzsche said that what is done for love is always beyond good and evil. Because love, and especially the desire that precedes it, does not obey moral codes. What is morally correct can be emotionally uninteresting. What is unstable can be unforgettable. A woman can rationally disapprove of the man who dominates her emotionally. But that doesn't stop her from desiring him, because desire doesn't consult judgment, it merely reacts to stimulus. The chaos of female desire is in fact a silent test. She doesn't want you to be perfect, she wants you to be strong. Strong emotionally, strong in presence, strong in retreat. She tests to see how far she can push you without you losing your bearings. She provokes jealousy, she disappears, she mocks, all of this unconsciously, because she needs to feel that you won't break, that you remain the same, even when she defies order. And if you give in, if you play into her emotional game, if you need to convince her, you've lost. Most men don't understand this game because they still believe love is a spreadsheet, a sum of good deeds. But she doesn't measure you by what you do. She measures you by what you provoke. You can do everything right and provoke nothing. And you can do everything wrong and provoke fascination. Why? Because her desire isn't rational, it's animal. And the animal within her wants to be dominated by the energy of someone she can't decipher. Here's the bottom line. Female desire needs to be led. Not by force, but by the frame. The frame is the invisible structure of meaning you impose on the interaction. Whoever has the frame leads. Whoever reacts to the other's frame loses. The man who leads the frame never justifies himself, never tries to convince. He simply is. He creates a world where she must adjust. And this, strange as it may seem, is liberating for her. Because her chaos finds rest in his structure. You don't need to be cruel, but you need to be stable. You need to be less accessible. You need to explain fewer things. You need to disappear when she expects you to be there. You need to reappear without apologizing. You need to look at her like you're not asking for permission, but testing whether she can handle being around you. This isn't dirty play. This is knowing how to play. Female desire is a dance, but it's not a ballroom dance. It's a ritual of subtle domination. The leader isn't the one who talks the most. It's the one who reacts the least. It's the one who knows how to silence at the right moment. It's the one who understands that the greatest aphrodisiac is doubt. That a well-calculated absence has more impact than 1,000 declarations. And that silence can be more sensual than touch. You don't have to be the bad guy. You just have to be the guy she can't predict, because her desire doesn't seek solace, it seeks command. And command imposes itself without shouting, without proving, without bending. It simply is. And she feels it. When you understand this, everything changes. You stop competing with the hottie at the gym, with the rich guy with the imported car, with the guy with 10K on Instagram. Because her desire isn't in these elements. It's in the invisible structure you impose. In the way you speak, how you disappear, how you impose silence, how you deal with disinterest, how you don't need her, even when you want to. She desires the chaos she can't control. But she only surrenders to the man who is chaos disguised as structure. To the man who appears calm, but inside carries the power to disappear, to reject, to ignore, without losing his center. This man is the emotional monster she fears and desires with every unconscious fiber of her being. And this is the key to everything. You only become irresistible when your value depends not on what she says, but on what she feels without being able to help it. Desire is irrational, but your structure can be trained. Chaos is inevitable, but you can become the man who masters it. And when that happens, she doesn't just want you, she needs you. Now that you understand that female desire is a chaos that doesn't respond to logic, but rather to emotional tension, symbolic scarcity, and energetic structure, one question remains. How do you become this man? How do you become the kind of presence that paralyzes even in silence? How do you embody this archetype that, even absent, dominates her mind more powerfully than any constant presence? The answer isn't in acting, it's in being. Being the monster, not the villain, not the scoundrel, but the emotional monster, the man who has transcended the need to be understood to be felt, the one who provokes fascination without promising anything, the one who appears and, at the exact moment she begins to cling, disappears with the precision of a master, not out of cruelty, but out of awareness, because he understood that nothing connects more than well-placed absence, that the right silence at the right moment can be more devastating than 1,000 confessions. This man is a paradox. He exudes power and calm at the same time. He doesn't shout, but he is heard. He doesn't need to prove himself because his posture says it all. He enters a room and changes the energy without touching anyone. How? Because his mind is at peace with his own worth. He doesn't wait to be desired to feel valuable. He already is. And this inner certainty overflows in a way that hypnotizes. The monster doesn't demand space, he occupies it. He doesn't demand attention, he attracts it. And this attraction isn't the result of manipulative tactics, but of a solid psychic structure. He knows what he represents. And more, he knows what he doesn't need to do. He doesn't validate others' emotional needs. He doesn't respond immediately. He doesn't pour his soul out in words. He observes, he creates tension, he leads through presence. Neil Strauss called this value demonstrated by absence. In the game, he learned from mystery that the truly seductive man isn't the one who's always available. It's the one who appears at strategic moments, plants seeds of tension, and then disappears. And when he disappears, he doesn't leave a hole. He leaves an echo. His absence reverberates more than the presence of many. This man doesn't fear silence. He masters it. Because he knows that silence is where her imagination begins to work. And nothing enslaves more than the mind itself trying to understand what wasn't said, what wasn't delivered, what was merely suggested. The monster is a master of suggestion. He says little but looks as if he's seen it all. He plays as if he doesn't need to prove anything. And above all, he knows how to deliver. At the peak, at the exact point where the impact will be eternal. He doesn't act out of necessity. He acts by choice. He doesn't offer his energy to just anyone, because he's not seducing out of need, but through expression. He doesn't want to conquer. He wants to make a mark. To make a mark as a symbol, as an archetype, as something that won't be forgotten because it's not fully understood. This man is not emotionally accessible. He is selective, And this selectivity isn't arrogance, it's a high standard. He doesn't melt with looks, nor surrender with promises, because he knows the more he preserves himself, the more value he creates. And the more value he creates, the more the woman spirals, because she feels he could have anyone. But he's here. For now, but maybe not for long. And this maybe is the sweetest poison of desire. The doubt about whether he'll stay, the uncertainty about whether he's truly interested, the ambiguity that makes her obsessed. The monster understands that the real game isn't verbal. It's energetic. It's looking and remaining silent. It's disappearing after a deep kiss. It's responding days later with a phrase that confuses more than it explains. It's letting absence speak. Because in her silence, he becomes a myth, and no myth is forgotten. He doesn't fear rejection, because he's never trying to be accepted. And that's the key. The man who doesn't seek validation is the only one who truly receives it, because he's not playing the game of the weak. He's playing a game where he's the prize. And when he positions himself like this, without arrogance, but with conviction, she feels it. She feels it in her body, in her gaze, in the thought that won't go away. This man isn't driven by need, he's driven by purpose. He knows his every word carries impact. That's why he speaks little, he acts even less. But when he does, the world changes. Because he's the storm that arrived without warning. And even when it passes, the atmosphere never returns to normal. He doesn't explain himself, he doesn't beg, he doesn't seek revenge. He simply disappears. He disappears and watches her mind disintegrate in his absence, because she feels she's lost something she can't name. A man who asked for nothing, but took everything. He took peace, he took control, he took predictability. The monster is the embodiment of what every woman fears and desires, because he activates the most primitive instinct, the instinct of voluntary submission. She surrenders not because she was convinced, but because she was absorbed. And this absorption only happens when the man masters himself before trying to dominate the other. The monster isn't about being cruel, it's about being whole. He's not afraid of losing because he doesn't play to win. He plays to make an impact. And the impact he causes is so profound that even when she tries to forget him, she compares everyone else to him. And none comes close. The biggest mistake you can make is trying to copy this man's actions without transforming yourself internally. There's no point in disappearing if you still fear not being called back. There's no point in feigning indifference if your heart beats with need. The monster only exists when the internal structure is real. When the peace of being alone overcomes the panic of being rejected. When silence isn't an absence of speech, it's absolute presence. And to get there, you need to break everything. Shatter the ego of the boy who wants validation. Shatter the identity of the good guy who still believes love is one with affection. Shatter the fear of loss, because only when you have nothing left to prove do you become impossible to ignore. This man is not a social construct. He is a return to his roots. He is the tribal leader everyone followed because he didn't ask for followers. He is the silent warrior who didn't need to show off. He is raw energy, refined by consciousness. He is the masculine in its purest form, not through shouting, but through presence. And in the end, she won't know why she desires you. She won't know why she haunts you in her thoughts, why she dreams of you even without knowing if you'll respond. Because you said nothing, you promised nothing, you didn't give everything. And that's exactly what makes you unforgettable. She will try to hate you. She will call you cold. She will say you're emotionally unavailable. But at night when she's alone, she'll remember your gaze, your absence, the touch that wasn't repeated, the enigma that wasn't explained, and she'll realize you were the only one who didn't try to be loved. And because of that, you were the only one she truly loved. You've made it this far. You've read every line, every uncomfortable truth, every cut necessary to kill the man you thought you needed to be. The nice guy is dead. The overly sensitive one too. And in their place, something much rarer begins to emerge. The man who doesn't beg for desire, who doesn't plead for attention, who doesn't live for her gaze, but who, paradoxically, becomes the one she seeks most when the house is silent and no one can touch her emotionally anymore. The transformation isn't easy. Because it requires you to abandon the armor of social acceptance. It requires you to stop playing the game of appearances and start operating in the realm of invisible structures. You need to become the archetype, and no longer the character. The archetype of someone who commands the emotional space, who projects tension with the calm of someone who has already conquered himself. Because true masculine power lies not in the volume of his voice, but in the strength of silence, in well-placed absence, in the emotional control that makes her a hostage to her own desire. This type of man isn't taught in schools, nor promoted in marketing campaigns. In fact, he's hidden, neutralized. Because an emotionally free man who knows the game is a danger to any structure that thrives on dependency. But the truth is this: either you master the emotional realm, or it will dominate you. If everything you've read so far made sense, it's because you felt this calling for a long time. Maybe you've tasted unfair rejection, the phrase "you're amazing," but something's missing, echoing in your head. Maybe you felt the anger of seeing an uninterested man desired while you were ignored for trying too hard. And if all of this hurt you, then great. Because it's precisely in pain that the instinct for true transformation is born. Now, if you're ready to take this to the next level, not just understand, but internalize this new structure, there's a brutally direct tool made for you. It's content that's unfiltered, unfussy, and won't coddle you. These are condensed insights, phrases that act as mental triggers, and techniques you can apply today to transform your posture. I'm talking about material created to reconfigure the way you position yourself in the world, with silent magnetism, emotional mastery, and unbreakable presence. This content isn't available just anywhere. It's not for everyone. It's an audiobook called The Forbidden Manual: How to Trigger Desire in 60 Seconds. And it was designed to shatter precisely those illusions that destroy attraction, masculinity, and the social power of men who still live trapped in outdated ideas about what it means to be a good partner. You'll understand, for example, why vulnerability misused destroys desire. You'll discover how true gender polarity has been distorted by modern culture. And, most importantly, you'll learn to recognize hidden agendas in relationships, conversations, and appearances. Not to manipulate, but to stop being manipulated, to escape emotional naivete and enter a state of consciousness few men achieve. If all you want is comfort, this manual isn't for you. But if you're ready to build a version of yourself that dominates, that attracts, that imposes without shouting, then this is your weapon. And it's available, not to those who need it, but to those who decide. You don't need to announce that you've changed. You need to act like you're no longer on the same page. Because, in the end, she'll never love you for what you show. She'll love you for who you are, even when she's not looking, for what she feels, even when you say nothing. And that feeling is only caused by emotional monsters. The men who walk alone but make the world follow in their footsteps. Now choose: continue to be remembered as the forgotten good guy, or become the silence she'll never be able to shake.